So warm welcome to all of you. Today we are going to learn about a new concept, data sources for research. So for conducting any research, we required sufficient sources of data. Unless otherwise, when we do not have a sufficient data sources, it's very tough to conduct research in any discipline. So that's the reason why when we want to conduct an efficient research, we should have a data sources, right? These data sources majorly classified into two types. We call them as the primary data sources and the secondary data sources. The primary data sources can also be called as the first-hand information. The secondary data sources can also be called as the second-hand information. A primary data sources are the sources where a researcher will collect the data with his own efforts. A primary data source is a source where a researcher will collect the data with his own efforts. We call it as a primary data source. So the primary data sources includes the survey methods. What are the survey methods? The survey methods include under primary data sources, they are the questionnaire, interviews, and observation. The primary data sources includes survey methods. The survey methods include three types. We call them as questionnaire, interviews, and observation. Right? So the primary data sources includes questionnaire, interviews, and observation. Now, what is a questionnaire? A questionnaire, it is like multiple choice type of questions. Suppose, how do you satisfy working conditions in the organization? Followed by brackets. 5 options will be given. A, highly satisfied. B, satisfied. C, moderately satisfied. D, dissatisfied. E, highly dissatisfied. Suppose the age group of the respondents: A, less than 25, B, 25 to 40, C, 40 to 50, and D, 50 and above. Educational qualifications of the respondents: A, illiterates. B, SSC. C, intermediate. D, undergraduates. E, postgraduates. Right? The respondent, what he will do over there, he will pick up whatever he's supposed to be answered. He will pick up that option and he will try to put over there. So that is what we call it as the concept related to the questionnaire. Right? Now, interviews. Interviews, as we know, a face-to-face interaction where two parties will come into the picture: interviewer and interviewee. Right? Interviewer and interviewee. So here a direct face-to-face interaction will come into the picture. So we are asking numerous questions related to our research, and what they will try to do is they will try to answer to those questions. So here a survey collecting information from the respondents, it will go like an interview process. It will go like an interview process. So that is what we call it as the concept related to interviews. And observations. This observation will tell you, we no need to discuss anything with the respondent, and we no need to talk anything with the respondent. Without talking and without writing, right, by just observing the situation, but just observing the condition, we can able to collect data. We can able to collect data. So that is what we call it as the concept related to the observation. So the primary data sources includes three types. So what we call the questionnaire, and the second one interviews, and the third one observations. So these three things we call it as the first hand information, right, where a researcher will try to collect the data with his own efforts. We call it is a primary data sources. Now the second one, the secondary data sources. The secondary data sources are the sources where a data it is already collected by someone, may be kept in any form. We call it as a secondary data sources. Secondary data sources are numerous, unless otherwise when we are not having a sufficient secondary data sources, even it's not possible to collect the reviews from the, even it's not possible to collect the literature review also. Even it's not possible to collect the literature review also. Even our literature review starts with the secondary data sources only. So through from magazines, journals, newspapers, articles, the findings of the articles, and the models. So where, however, we are trying to collect the literature, we starts with the secondary data sources. The secondary data sources are the numerous, like journals, magazines, the newspapers, the articles, news channels, e-sources, government reports, and Indian Statistical Institution reports, and the balance sheets, and the sales reports, and the production reports, and the profit and loss accounts, right? The national publications and international publications, and the conference proceedings, right? So all these are the various sources of secondary data sources. In fact, every research will start with a secondary data sources only. Every research will start with the secondary data sources only. So later on, if our secondary data sources it's not sufficient and not supportable to conduct a sufficient research, we will take the advantage of the primary data sources. So primary data sources, it is empirical study in nature, which includes three types. We call questionnaire, interviews, and observations. And the secondary data sources are the numerous. The data sources which are already collected by someone, may be kept in any form. We call it as the concept related to the secondary data sources. The secondary data sources are like journals, magazines, newspapers, and articles, news channels, e-sources, government reports, ISI reports, and balance sheets, and the sales reports, and all these things will fall under the secondary data sources, right? So this is what the concept related to the data sources for research. In fact, the research will start with a problem identification. Even when we properly identify a problem, followed by the review of literature, and followed by objectives preparation, and followed by the research design, and followed by the sampling design, ultimately you need to come to a particular point. We need to collect the data from various sources. Unless otherwise, when we do not collect a sufficient data from various sources, when we do not tabulate the data into rows and columns in Excel sheet, it's not possible to conduct any sort of it's not possible to apply any sort of analytical tools for that. When you want to apply descriptive statistics or else inferential statistics, what you need to do is preliminarily you should have a data in your hand. This data will be collected from various sources. That's what we call it as the concept related to the primary data sources and the secondary data sources. So later on, we are trying to apply the various types of statistics. We call them as descriptive statistics and the inferential statistics. The descriptive statistics, which describes the phenomena with the help of past data by taking the advantage of graphs and charts, like pie chart, bar chart, line chart, scatter plot chart, area chart, with the help of various types of charts. These are descriptive statistics. Will try to describe the phenomenon. At the same time, we'll take the advantage of measures of central tendency and measures of dispersion. The measures of central tendency includes mean, median, mode, and the measures of dispersion includes the variance, range, quartile deviation, standard deviation, and so all these things will comes under the uh, descriptive statistics. Whereas when you go for the inferential statistics, there is a concept will come into the picture: sample and population. We will pick up a sample from the population, and we will try to analyze the sample from the population. Based on that, we will try to infer the population parameter. Whatever the output that we are trying to extract from the sample analysis and the sample outcome, we are trying to infer to the population. We are trying to infer a population parameter. The concept we call it as the inferential statistics, right? So all these are the various things, numerous things which will come under research. In fact, the tests, various kinds of tests, is classified into parametric tests and non-parametric tests, right? So like the parametric tests and non-parametric tests, chi-square test, analysis of variance, and F test, T test, Z test, correlation, regression, and bivariate analysis, multivariate analysis, univariate analysis. So these are the various types of analysis which we need to apply after data collection and after tabulation. So this is what the concept related to the data sources for research. So it's primarily divided into two types: primary data sources and secondary data sources. The primary data sources can also be called as the first-hand information. The secondary data sources can also be called as the second-hand information. The primary data sources includes the questionnaire, interview, and observation. The secondary data sources are the data which is already collected by someone, may be kept in any form. We call it as the secondary data sources. The secondary data sources are the journals, magazines, newspapers, articles, and news channels, and e-sources, and government reports, and the Indian Statistical Institution reports, and the balance sheets, and the sales reports, and all these things will come under the secondary data sources. So I hope you understand the data sources to conduct a research. So every research will start with the secondary data sources, and if it's not sufficient, we'll take the advantage of the primary data sources. So this is what the concept related to the data sources in business research.